Few of his American classmates could imagine that the quiet new student they loved to torment was heir to a legacy written in blood and fear, the son of Viktor Volkov, Moscow's most feared underground ruler. Behind Alex's silence lay a world where respect wasn't earned with words, but commanded through power. Yet he had sworn to keep his father's dark empire at bay, even as the bullies pushed him closer to breaking that promise. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The contrast between Alex's two realities couldn't have been starker. At Riverside High, he was just another new student from overseas, the quiet foreign kid who sat at the back of the class, struggling with English idioms and American customs. His classmates saw only what he allowed them to see, a slender 17-year-old with close-cropped dark hair and careful movements who kept to himself and never fought back. But at home, Alex Volkov inhabited a different universe entirely. The sprawling estate on the outskirts of town stood like a fortress, its high walls and sophisticated security systems guarding secrets that would shock the community. Here, heavily armed men in tactical gear patrolled the grounds with military precision. Inside, visiting crime lords from across the globe spoke in hushed tones around his father's mahogany desk, while servants moved like shadows through the marble halls. Viktor Volkov had relocated their operation to America 5 months ago, a calculated move to expand his empire while evading mounting pressure from rivals in Moscow. To the affluent circles of their new hometown, he was merely another successful international businessman, charming, generous, and refreshingly old-world. But in the shadows of the criminal underworld, he was known by another name, the Ghost, a title earned through decades of making both problems and people vanish without a trace. Alex had spent his childhood in a world of strict protocols and lethal consequences. He'd learned to read body language before English, to spot a concealed weapon before he could drive, and to never, ever trust anyone outside the family's inner circle. But despite his father's empire, or perhaps because of it, Alex had yearned for something different. He'd begged Viktor to let him attend a regular American school, desperate for even a glimpse of normal teenage life. To everyone's surprise, Viktor had agreed, but with one unbreakable condition: Alex must never reveal his true identity or leverage his family's influence. You want to understand America? Good. But you will learn it the hard way, Viktor had declared, his voice carrying the weight of years of hard-earned wisdom. Remember, son, power that is given means nothing compared to power that is earned. Let them underestimate you. Let them think you are weak. This is how you will truly learn who you are. But as Alex navigated the hostile halls of Riverside High, that promise became increasingly difficult to keep. The local bullies, led by Marcus Wheeler, had marked him as an easy target from day one. Marcus was a senior with a wrestler's build and a chip on his shoulder the size of his father's failed business. He seemed to take personal offense at Alex's reserved nature and foreign accent, as if their very existence was a challenge to his authority. The harassment started small: shoulder checks in the hallway, mocking imitations of his accent, cruel notes left in his locker. But it escalated quickly. They made sure he ate lunch alone, knocked his books from his hands, and tried to steal his watch, a timepiece worth more than their parents' combined annual salaries. If only they knew that the quiet boy they tormented had grown up learning combat from ex-Spetsnaz operators, or that he could end their reign of terror with a single phone call. But Alex endured it all silently, finding solace in his father's private library after school. There, surrounded by ancient books on philosophy and strategy, he would lose himself in the wisdom of past warriors and leaders. The leather-bound volumes, some centuries old, had been Viktor's most prized possessions when they fled Moscow. Books are power, his father always said, but only if you have the patience to understand them. Alex had his own reasons for maintaining his cover. He needed, to prove to himself that he could handle his problems without relying on his father's fearsome reputation. Each day he repeated Viktor's teachings like a mantra: patience, control, strategy. Yet as Marcus and his gang grew bolder, Alex couldn't help but remember his father's other favorite saying, "Sometimes the wolf must bare his teeth if only to remind the sheep why they should be afraid." The breaking point came on a rain-soaked Thursday in October. Alex had stayed late after school, working on a history project in the library, a detailed analysis of the Cold War that would have been amusing to his father, given how much of the unofficial history Viktor had witnessed firsthand. The corridors were nearly empty when Alex finally packed his books, the fluorescent lights casting long shadows across the worn linoleum floors. He heard them before he saw them. Marcus Wheeler and his gang, their voices echoing from around the corner. Among them was the distinctive laugh of Travis Bennett, Marcus's right-hand man and the son of the local police chief. Alex could have taken another route, but something in him had grown tired of running. Instead, he continued walking, his footsteps measured and deliberate. "Well, look who it is," Marcus's voice carried down the hallway. "Our favorite Russian charity case." The group spread out, forming a loose semicircle around Alex. 5 of them today: Marcus, Travis, and 3 other seniors whose names Alex had never bothered to learn. In his old life, he would have already assessed their weaknesses. Marcus favored his right side, Travis had a bad knee from football, and the others were just followers who had never been in a real fight. "You know, Volkov," Marcus continued, stepping closer, "my dad's business went under last year. Some foreign investors bought him out, stripped everything down." He cracked his knuckles, a gesture that might have been intimidating to someone who hadn't grown up watching real violence. "Makes me wonder about your dad's international business. Must be nice coming here and taking what belongs to others." Alex remained silent, though his mind was racing. He recognized the shift in Marcus's tone. This wasn't just normal bullying anymore. There was real anger there, personal grievance seeking an outlet. More concerning was the look in Travis's eyes. The police chief's son was holding something behind his back, and Alex had a pretty good idea what it was. "Nothing to say." Marcus shoved Alex hard, sending his backpack sliding across the floor. "No smart comments in that broken English of yours?" Another shove, harder this time. Alex allowed himself to stumble back, maintaining the illusion they expected. Inside, though, his father's training screamed at him to act. He could end this in seconds. He knew exactly how many moves it would take to put all 5 of them on the ground. The memory of his first real lesson in violence flashed through his mind. He had been 12, watching from his father's study in Moscow as Viktor's men dealt with a betrayal. The screams had been educational, but it was his father's words afterward that stuck with him. "Power isn't about who can inflict the most pain, Alexander. It's about knowing exactly how much force to use, and, more importantly, when to use it." Travis finally revealed what he'd been hiding: a switchblade, its metal catching the fluorescent light. Alex's pulse quickened, not from fear, but from the realization that this situation had crossed a critical threshold. A knife changed things. It meant they weren't just looking to humiliate him anymore. "Hold him," Marcus commanded, and 2 of his followers grabbed Alex's arms. In his mind, Alex could already see the sequence of moves that would dislocate their shoulders, the precise angle needed to sweep Marcus's legs from under him, the pressure point that would make Travis drop the knife. 5 years of training under Dmitri, his father's security chief, had drilled these responses into muscle memory. "You rich foreigners think you can just take whatever you want," Marcus spat, his face inches from Alex's. "Time someone taught you a lesson." He nodded to Travis, who flicked open the blade with practiced ease. Not his first time using it, Alex noted clinically. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Travis lunged forward with the knife, aiming to frighten rather than seriously hurt, a distinction that would have mattered more if Alex were actually helpless. In one fluid motion, Alex broke free from his captors, their grips amateur and predictable. He felt something deeper awaken inside him, a cold clarity that his father had always said marked their bloodline. Alex caught Travis's wrist with precision born from countless training sessions, applying pressure to the radial nerve exactly as Dmitri had taught him. The knife clattered to the floor as Travis's hand spasmed involuntarily. In the same movement, Alex pulled the larger boy forward, using his own momentum to send him sprawling. It was over in less than 2 seconds, a brief flash of the skill he'd spent years concealing. The corridor fell silent. Marcus and his remaining followers stood frozen, their worldview visibly shifting as they processed what they'd just witnessed. Alex could see the questions forming in their eyes, the sudden uncertainty about who and what they'd been dealing with. "Pick up your friend," Alex said quietly, his accent thicker than usual, the words carrying an authority he'd inherited but never embraced. "And understand something. I don't fight because I choose not to, not because I can't." The words carried echoes of his father's philosophy, teachings he'd absorbed along with combat training and business lessons. As they helped Travis to his feet, Alex saw something new in Marcus's eyes. Not just fear, but recognition. It was the same look he'd seen countless times in his father's study, when people finally realized they'd miscalculated their position. For the first time since arriving in America, Alex had let the mask slip, showing just a glimpse of the power that ran in his blood. Later that night, as Alex sat in his father's library recounting the incident, Viktor listened with an expression that mixed pride and concern. "You showed restraint," his father noted, pouring himself a glass of vodka. "But now they've seen behind the curtain. The question is, what will you do with that knowledge?" Alex stared out the window at the rain, watching the security teams make their rounds of the estate. He had maintained his cover for months, playing the role of the helpless foreign student. But now that they'd seen a hint of his true nature, he knew things would never be quite the same. The careful balance he'd maintained between his two worlds had shifted, and the consequences of that shift were yet to reveal themselves. The day after the confrontation, Alex noticed subtle changes in his daily routine. His father's security detail, usually invisible, had doubled their presence around the school. Viktor hadn't mentioned it, but Alex recognized Dmitri's methods. The unmarked cars strategically parked across the street, the new maintenance worker who appeared in the school hallways. His father was taking no chances after learning about Travis's knife, but it was another figure who would truly shape the aftermath of that rainy Thursday. Nikolai Petrov had been Viktor's advisor long before Alex was born, a man whose quiet demeanor belied a lifetime of carefully masked power. Unlike the other members of his father's organization, Nikolai carried no visible weapons, wore no tactical gear. His weapon was his mind, and it had proven far more lethal than any gun. Alex found Nikolai waiting in the estate's gymnasium that evening, a spacious room filled with training equipment that would have looked more at home in a military facility than a private residence. The older man sat cross-legged on a training mat, his silver hair neatly combed, wearing a simple black sweater that probably cost more than most cars. "Your father tells me you had an interesting day at school," Nikolai said in Russian, his voice carrying the cultured accent of Moscow's elite universities. "Sit with me, Alexander Viktorovich. Let's talk about power and its consequences." Alex sat across from him, noting how Nikolai's eyes seemed to see straight through his carefully maintained facade. "I didn't start the fight," Alex began, but Nikolai raised a hand to stop him. "Starting a fight and choosing to engage are different things," Nikolai said. "You could have taken another route when you heard them coming. You could have called for the security team your father has watching you. Instead, you chose to walk straight into conflict." His lips curved in a slight smile. "Rather like your father at your age." The comparison startled Alex. Viktor rarely spoke about his youth, about how he'd built his empire from nothing in the chaos following the Soviet collapse. "I'm not trying to be like him," Alex said quietly. I was tired of running." Nikolai nodded, reaching into his pocket to remove an old chess piece, a black knight worn smooth by years of handling. "Do you know why the knight is often considered the most strategic piece in chess?" He passed the piece to Alex. "It's not the most powerful. The queen holds that honor. But the knight can move in ways other pieces cannot. It can jump over obstacles, attack from unexpected angles. Alex turned the piece over in his hands, feeling its weight. You're saying I should be more strategic? I'm saying that power comes in many forms, and direct confrontation is often the least effective. Nikolai's eyes took on a distant look. When I first met your father, he was like you, young, capable, burning with the need to prove himself. He thought power meant winning every fight. It took years for him to understand that true power lies in choosing which fights are worth winning. Standing smoothly despite his age, Nikolai walked to one of the training dummies. Your father tells me you've been reading Sun Tzu in the library. What does he say about supreme excellence in warfare? Supreme excellence consists of breaking the enemy's resistance without fighting. Alex quoted automatically. Exactly. Yesterday, you showed those boys a glimpse of your strength. Now they're afraid. But fear without purpose is dangerous. It makes people unpredictable. Nikolai turned back to Alex. Your father's enemies fear him not because of what he does, but because of what he could do. The difference is subtle but crucial. The wisdom of those words sank in as Alex remembered the look in Marcus's eyes after the confrontation. Not just fear, but a burning hatred born of humiliation. Travis Bennett's father is the police chief, Alex said. If they decide to retaliate, then you must be prepared, Nikolai agreed. But preparation doesn't always mean combat. Sometimes it means understanding your opponents better than they understand themselves. He gestured around the gymnasium. All this equipment, all your training, these are tools, nothing more. Your real strength must come from here. He tapped his temple. And here. He placed a hand over his heart. Moving to a nearby bench, Nikolai retrieved a folder that Alex hadn't noticed before. I took the liberty of looking into Marcus Wheeler's family situation. His father's business didn't simply fail. It was systematically dismantled by a consortium of European investors. Shell companies, leveraged buyouts, very sophisticated financial maneuvering. He handed the folder to Alex. The kind of operation that coincidentally bears striking similarities to some of your father's past business strategies. Alex's blood ran cold as he scanned the documents. Are you saying my father? I'm saying that understanding the source of someone's anger can be more valuable than knowing how to break their arm. Nikolai's voice was gentle, but firm. Marcus Wheeler's hatred of foreigners stealing from his family? It's not entirely unfounded. Your father's organization may not have been directly involved, but the methods used, well, let's say the resemblance is unlikely to be coincidental. The revelation hit Alex like a physical blow. His desire to live a normal life, to distance himself from his father's world, suddenly seemed naive. He was connected to it all, whether he wanted to be or not. What should I do? He asked, looking up at his mentor. Nikolai's expression softened. Learn from this, understand that every action has ripples we can't always see. Your father's power, his methods, they affect more than just his immediate targets. Those boys at school? Their anger comes from somewhere real, even if their actions are wrong. He placed a hand on Alex's shoulder. But most importantly, understand this. You can't change who you are or where you come from. What you can change is how you use the power you've inherited. Your father rules through fear because that's what his world demanded. But you have the opportunity to find a different way. As the evening shadows lengthened across the gymnasium floor, Alex absorbed Nikolai's words. He had spent months trying to separate his two worlds, but perhaps the real challenge was learning to navigate between them with wisdom rather than just strength. The Black Knight sat heavy in his pocket, a reminder that sometimes the most powerful moves aren't the most obvious ones. News of the hallway incident spread through Riverside High like wildfire, growing more distorted with each retelling. Some said Alex had put Travis in the hospital. Others claimed he'd used some secret Russian martial art. By Monday morning, the quiet foreign student had become something of a legend and a target. Marcus and his gang kept their distance, but Alex could feel their eyes on him, filled with a mixture of fear and hatred that made his skin crawl. Travis hadn't returned to school, and rumors circulated that his father, Chief Bennett, was asking questions about the Volkov family. The pressure reached its breaking point during fifth period chemistry. Alex was working alone at his lab station when his phone buzzed with an encrypted message from Dmitri. Security breach at the estate. Your father's study compromised. Stay at school. Wait for extraction. Alex's hands trembled slightly as he deleted the message. In all his years within his father's organization, there had never been a breach of the estate's security. The implications were staggering. Someone had gotten past the guards, the cameras, the motion sensors. Someone had reached the heart of Viktor Volkov's power. But it was the next message that made his blood run cold. Marcus Wheeler's father spotted leaving police station with Chief Bennett 1 hour ago. Multiple unmarked vehicles monitoring school perimeter. Possible connection. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. Marcus's father hadn't just lost his business to foreign investors. He'd lost it to Victor's organization. And now, somehow, they'd figured it out. The bullying, the escalating confrontations. They hadn't been random. They'd been probing, testing, watching for reactions that might confirm their suspicions about the new Russian family in town. Alex forced himself to breathe steadily, just as Nikolai had taught him. His mind raced through the implications. If they had evidence of his father's activities, if they'd managed to get into the study, the carefully constructed facade of their new American life could crumble in an instant. The school's PA system crackled to life. Alexander Volkov to the principal's office. Alexander Volkov, please report to the principal's office immediately. Alex didn't move. Dmitri's warning echoed in his mind. Stay at school. Wait for extraction. But if he didn't respond to the summons, he'd draw even more attention. Making a show of calmly packing his books, Alex raised his hand. May I go to the office? The teacher nodded, and Alex stepped into the hallway. Instead of turning toward the office, he headed for the east exit, where he knew the school's camera coverage was weakest. Another message buzzed on his phone. Do not engage with local authorities. Extraction team 4 minutes out. Head to secondary rendezvous point. He was halfway to the exit when he heard familiar voices around the corner. Marcus Wheeler and Chief Bennett, their tones urgent and angry. He'll be here soon, the chief was saying. Your father found enough evidence in that study to put Volkov away for years. All we need is the son to confirm a few details. Alex backed away silently, his heart pounding. They weren't just after his father, they were after him too. He turned to find another exit, only to see Travis standing at the other end of the hallway, his arm still bandaged from their confrontation. Their eyes met, and Alex saw the moment Travis decided to raise the alarm. He's over here, Travis shouted. Dad, he's running. Alex's training took over. He sprinted toward the nearest stairwell, taking the steps 3 at a time. Behind him, he could hear multiple sets of footsteps and Chief Bennett's authoritative voice, Alexander Volkov, stop. We just want to talk. But Alex knew better. In his father's world, there was no such thing as just talking with the police. If they had evidence from the study, if they were working with Wheeler's father, then this wasn't about a simple school fight anymore. This was about revenge, about taking down the organization that had destroyed their lives. He burst through the ground floor emergency exit, setting off the alarm. The parking lot was empty except for a few cars, and in the distance he could see unmarked police vehicles moving to block the exits. His phone buzzed one final time. Extraction compromised. Move to contingency point, Charlie. Trust no one. As Alex ran, ducking between cars to avoid being seen, he thought of Nikolai's words about power and consequences. The carefully constructed balance between his two worlds hadn't just tipped. It had shattered completely. There would be no going back to being the quiet foreign student. No more pretending to be normal. The sound of sirens in the distance made his decision for him. Alex pulled the Black Knight chess piece from his pocket, running his thumb over its worn surface one last time before dropping it in a storm drain. Sometimes, the most powerful move was knowing when to retreat, when to become a ghost, just like his father had taught him. Alex's escape route led him through the school's athletic fields, staying low and using the baseball dugouts for cover. His father's training echoed in his mind. When everyone expects you to run, sometimes the best hiding place is just out of sight. Instead of fleeing toward the extraction point, he doubled back toward the gymnasium building, knowing the police would focus their search outward. The maintenance door's lock was no match for the skills Dmitri had taught him. Within seconds, Alex slipped inside the dimly lit equipment room, his breathing controlled despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. Through a narrow window, he watched police cars circle the school perimeter like hungry wolves. His phone, now on silent, displayed a string of encrypted messages from his father's organization. Most were tactical updates. Security teams engaged with local police near the estate, evidence being purged, contingency plans activated. But one message, from Viktor himself, stood out. Your choice now, son. Come in, or handle it your way. Either path has consequences. Trust your instincts. Alex closed his eyes, letting the weight of the decision settle over him. Running meant leaving everything behind. His attempt at a normal life, his school, any chance of maintaining his cover. Staying meant facing whatever evidence the Wheelers had obtained, potentially becoming the weak link in his father's organization. A soft sound made his eyes snap open. He wasn't alone in the equipment room. There, in the shadows between rows of gymnastics mats, stood Sarah Chen, the quiet girl from his advanced physics class, the only person who had ever offered to be his lab partner. She stared at him with wide eyes, a gym bag clutched to her chest. I saw you run in here, she whispered. There are police everywhere. They're saying your father is some kind of crime boss. Alex's mind raced through scenarios. Sarah had seen him enter. She could expose his location. The old instincts, honed by years in his father's world, suggested ensuring her silence. But something in her expression, concern rather than fear, made him hesitate. It's complicated, he said finally, his accent thicker under stress. You should leave. Forget you saw me. Sarah took a step forward instead. My uncle, he worked for people like your father, back in Hong Kong. I recognize the signs, the way you carry yourself, how you're always watching exits. She swallowed hard. He taught me that sometimes what looks like darkness from the outside is just someone trying to protect their own light. The words hit Alex with unexpected force. In all his months at Riverside High, playing the role of the helpless foreign student, he'd never imagined someone might see through his facade and understand rather than judge. A commotion outside drew their attention. Through the window, they could see Marcus Wheeler talking to his father and Chief Bennett, gesturing animatedly toward the school buildings. More police cars were arriving, and men in tactical gear were beginning to establish a perimeter. They're going to search the buildings, Sarah said quietly. The equipment room will be first. It's an obvious hiding place. She hefted her gym bag. But they don't look twice at students leaving practice. Alex studied her face, looking for any sign of deception. Why would you help me? Because I've seen how you handle Marcus and his friends. You could have hurt them, but you always chose not to. She unzipped the bag, revealing her volleyball uniform and gear. My uncle taught me something else too. Real strength is in the choices we make, not the power we have. The words echoed Nikolai's teaching so closely that Alex felt a chill. Outside, he could hear Chief Bennett organizing search teams. Time was running out. He had to choose. Trust this unexpected ally or find his own way out. Sarah pulled her spare practice uniform from the bag. It's your decision. But whatever you decide, do it because it's what you want, not what your father's world trained you to do. At that moment, another message flashed on his phone. Police approaching gymnasium. Multiple units. Armed response team on site. The net was closing, and Alex Volkov, heir to a criminal empire, had to make a choice that would define far more than just this moment. Looking at the uniform, then back at Sarah's determined face, Alex felt something shift inside him. Perhaps true power, as Nikolai had suggested, wasn't about controlling every situation. Sometimes, it was about knowing when to trust, when to let someone else help carry the weight of your worlds. The volleyball team's practice uniform felt strange against Alex's skin as he walked beside Sarah through the school's side entrance. Every instinct screamed at him to run, to fight, to do anything but trust this girl he barely knew. Yet here he was, wearing borrowed clothes, his hair dampened to change its appearance, carrying a gym bag as if he belonged on the court. "Keep your shoulders relaxed," Sarah murmured as they approached the police checkpoint. "You're just another player heading home after practice. Nothing more." Chief Bennett himself was interviewing students as they left, his keen eyes searching for any sign of his target. Alex could feel the weight of the chief's gaze as they approached. Years of training had taught him how to kill a man in seconds, how to disappear without a trace. But now his survival depended on something entirely different, appearing completely ordinary. "Practice ran late?" Bennett asked Sarah, his tone casual but his eyes sharp. "Coach Martinez is crazy about serves," Sarah replied with just the right amount of teenage exhaustion in her voice. "We've been drilling for hours." She gestured to Alex. "My cousin's staying with us while his parents are out of town. Mom insisted I bring him along. Doesn't want me walking home alone with everything going on. Alex kept his head slightly down, mimicking the posture of the other athletes he'd observed during his months at school. He'd modified his stance to appear shorter, less threatening, adopting the slight slouch of someone more interested in their phone than their surroundings. Bennett's radio crackled. "Subject sighted near the west parking lot," a voice reported. The chief's attention shifted immediately, and he waved them through. Alex felt the man's suspicion lingering like a physical touch as they walked away, but he maintained his casual pace, matching Sarah's relaxed stride. They were halfway down the block when Sarah's phone buzzed. She checked it, her expression tightening. "My brother just texted. There are police cars circling our neighborhood. They're searching houses." Alex's mind raced through options. His father's organization would have multiple extraction plans in place, but accessing any of them meant potentially exposing Sarah to more danger. She had already risked enough by helping him. "I know a place," Sarah said, as if reading his thoughts. "My uncle's old workshop. It's been closed since he went back to Hong Kong, but I still have the key. It's in the industrial district. The last place they'd look for a student." The decision to trust Sarah had already altered the course of events more than Alex could have predicted. Each step away from his father's prepared escape routes was a step into unknown territory, yet something about this felt right, choosing his own path rather than following the one laid out for him. They took a circuitous route to the workshop using service alleys and side streets to avoid main roads. As they walked, Sarah filled the tense silence with quiet observations about her uncle, painting a picture of a man who had walked the line between worlds, much like Alex's father. "He always said that power wasn't about what you could do to others," she explained, unlocking a heavy steel door that led into a dusty workspace. "It was about what you chose not to do, even when you could." The workshop was a large, open space filled with old machinery and workbenches. Signs in Chinese and English marked different areas, and a small office in the corner still held a desk and chair. It wasn't the luxury of his father's estate, but it offered something more valuable: anonymity. As Sarah secured the door behind them, Alex's phone vibrated with another message from his father. "Police raiding estate. Wheeler provided documents. Situation critical. Last chance for extraction." Alex stared at the message, feeling the weight of generations of Volkov power pressing down on him. His father's world offered security, strength, and absolute control, but it also meant always living in the shadows, always seeing threats in every kindness. Looking at Sarah as she moved around the workshop, turning on minimal lights and checking sight lines, Alex saw a different kind of strength. She had chosen to help him despite knowing the risks, guided by principles her uncle had taught her rather than fear or obligation. "You should go home," Alex said finally. "Your family will worry." and I've already put you at enough risk." Sarah paused in her preparations. "My uncle also taught me that the most dangerous moment is when you think you have to face everything alone." She pulled out her phone, showing him a news alert. Local business mogul linked to international crime syndicate. Police conducting raids. "The whole city will be looking for you now," she continued. "But sometimes the best hiding place is in plain sight. My uncle's workshop runs a legitimate business, or it did before he left. Maybe it's time for it to reopen with a new apprentice who keeps his head down and learns the trade." The proposal hung in the air between them. It wasn't his father's way of doing things. It wasn't even Nikolai's strategic maneuvering. It was something entirely new, a chance to build something of his own, away from both the violence of his father's world and the pretense of his school life. For 3 days, Alex disappeared into the role of apprentice machinist at Sarah's uncle's workshop. He learned to operate the basic machinery, keeping his head down whenever customers came in for repairs. The local news was filled with stories about the Volkov investigation, but no one spared a second glance at the quiet young man in work overalls, focused intently on learning to repair industrial equipment. Sarah came by each evening, bringing food and news. The police had questioned her family, but her reputation as a straight-A student and athlete made her above suspicion. Meanwhile, Viktor Volkov had vanished completely, along with most of his key personnel. The estate stood empty, crime scene tape across its gates, a visible reminder of power crumbling, On the 4th morning, Alex was alone in the workshop when the bell above the door chimed. He looked up to see Marcus Wheeler walking in, followed by his father. Alex's heart rate spiked, but his expression remained neutral, his face partially obscured by the welding mask he wore. "We need some work done," Mr. Wheeler said, not really looking at Alex as he placed a broken machine part on the counter. "The old owner used to handle all our repairs, hoping the new management is just as competent." Alex nodded silently, examining the part. It was from one of the machines in Wheeler's former factory, the same factory his father's organization had helped strip away. The irony wasn't lost on him. "Shop's under new management," Alex said, deliberately thickening his accent and pitching his voice lower. "But we maintain same standards." Marcus was wandering the workshop, his attention seemingly casual but his movements deliberate. Alex recognized the behavior. He was searching for something or someone. The Wheelers hadn't given up their hunt. "You know," Mr. Wheeler said, leaning on the counter, "it's interesting how this place suddenly reopened. Right around the same time that Russian kid disappeared." His eyes were sharp, calculating. Almost like someone needed a place to hide. Alex kept his focus on the machine part, using the work as an excuse to avoid eye contact. Many businesses reopening now, economy improving. He named a price and repair time, his tone professionally disinterested. Mr. Wheeler smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "We'll be back tomorrow for the part. Come on, Marcus." As they left, Alex's phone buzzed with an encrypted message, not from his father's organization, but from Sarah. "Urgent. Police found something at your house. They're expanding the search. My brother overheard Dad's police scanner. They know about Uncle's connection to similar operations in Hong Kong. Workshop might be compromised." The message confirmed what Alex had already suspected from the Wheelers' visit. His sanctuary was no longer safe. But before he could formulate a plan, another message arrived, this one from an unknown number. "Your father sends his regards. Extraction team en route. Be ready in 15 minutes. This ends tonight." Alex's hands tightened on the workbench. His father's world was reaching out to reclaim him, offering the security of familiar shadows. It would be easy to disappear back into that life, to let Victor's organization handle the Wheelers and Chief Bennett with their usual efficiency. But Sarah's next message made the decision more complicated. "Don't run. My uncle left something in the workshop that might help, behind the old painting in the office. Trust me." Moving quickly to the office, Alex found the painting, a traditional Chinese landscape. Behind it was a small safe, its design at least 20 years old. The combination lock would have taken hours to crack professionally, but Alex noticed something else. Subtle marks around the numbers, visible only to someone trained to look for them. Using techniques Dmitri had taught him, Alex decoded the worn patterns. The safe clicked open, revealing a single USB drive and a handwritten note in Chinese. Alex's Mandarin was basic, but he could make out enough. For when the past catches up. Sometimes the best weapon is the truth. His phone buzzed again. 10 minutes to extraction. Signal your compliance. Alex stared at the USB drive, understanding dawning. Sarah's uncle hadn't just run a legitimate business alongside his underworld connections. He'd kept insurance, documentation, proof. The kind of evidence that could either destroy an empire or protect someone from it. The choice before him was stark. Embrace his father's world fully and disappear into its shadows, or use whatever was on this drive to forge his own path. But he had to decide quickly. In the distance, he could hear sirens approaching, and time was running out. The contents of the USB drive illuminated the workshop's office in a pale blue glow as Alex quickly scanned through the files. Sarah's uncle had been thorough, years of transactions, photographs, and recordings documenting the intertwined operations of various criminal enterprises across Asia and, more recently, America. Among them, Alex found detailed records of his father's organization's expansion into the U.S., including the systematic dismantling of Wheeler's business. But something else caught his attention. Evidence of a deeper conspiracy. The Wheelers hadn't just been innocent victims. Marcus's father had been laundering money for a rival organization, using his legitimate business as a front. Victor's takeover hadn't been random. It had been retaliation for Wheeler's attempt to help another group muscle in on Volkov territory. 5 minutes to extraction, his phone reminded him. Through the workshop windows, Alex could see black SUVs beginning to circulate in the area. His father's men were closing in. Soon, they would take him away from all of this. The school, the Wheelers, Sarah. He would disappear into the shadows of his father's world forever. The door chimed again. Alex quickly pocketed the USB drive and stepped out of the office to find Sarah rushing in, her face flushed from running. "They're coming," she said breathlessly. "Police, your father's men, everyone. My brother just heard it on the scanner. They're coordinating a joint operation. Chief Bennett convinced them the workshop is your hideout." "Your uncle's files," Alex said, pulling out the drive. "They show everything, the Wheelers, my father, all of it. We could expose them all." Sarah's eyes widened as she grasped the implications. That's what Uncle meant about the truth being the best weapon. But, Alex, if you release this, it won't just hurt the Wheelers. Your father will be destroyed too, Alex finished. The weight of the small device in his hand felt enormous. Maybe that's not a bad thing. Before Sarah could respond, the workshop's back door burst open. Nikolai strode in, his usual elegant appearance somewhat disheveled. "We have to go now. Your father's enemies are moving." The Wheelers didn't just find evidence of Victor's operations. They made a deal with the Taiwanese. They're using the police raid as cover for something bigger. A distant explosion punctuated his words, making the workshop's windows rattle. Sarah rushed to look outside. "There's smoke coming from the direction of your estate." "A coordinated attack," Nikolai confirmed grimly. "Victor's enemies are making their move, using the Wheelers' local influence as cover. We need to get you to safety, Alexander." But Alex stood his ground, the USB drive heavy in his pocket. "All this time, you taught me about different kinds of power, about making choices. Was that just to keep me under control?" Nikolai's expression softened. "I taught you what I believed you needed to know. Your father. He built his empire on fear because that's what he understood. But you, Alexander, you've always seen a different way." More explosions echoed in the distance. Sarah's phone buzzed with alerts, reports of gunfire near the estate, of police confronting armed men throughout the city. Two worlds were colliding, and the destruction would only spread. "What about Sarah?" Alex demanded. "Her uncle's files implicate everyone. Once they realize what she has, then protect her," Nikolai said simply. "But do it your way, not your father's. The main doors of the workshop crashed open. Marcus Wheeler stood there with his father and several men Alex didn't recognize, hard-looking individuals with barely concealed weapons. Behind them, police sirens wailed. "Well, well," Mr. Wheeler said, his voice cold. "The young prince of the Volkov Empire and his father's trusted advisor, the Taiwanese, will be pleased." "You're working with them," Alex said, the pieces falling into place. "You sold out to my father's rivals for revenge." Wheeler's smile was ugly. "They offered a better deal. Your father took everything from me. Now I get to return the favor. The police are busy dealing with the chaos at your estate. No one will look too closely at what happens here." Sarah stepped forward, her voice steady despite her fear. "You're wrong, Mr. Wheeler. People are already looking." She held up her phone. "Everything that happens here is being streamed live, and I mean everything." The revelation made Wheeler's men shift uneasily. Live exposure was every criminal's nightmare, but Wheeler himself was too far gone in his revenge. "Take their phones," he ordered. "Once we're done here, the only story anyone will find is how the Volkov heir tragically died resisting arrest." Alex felt an odd sense of calm descend over him. All his training, all Nikolai's lessons, had led to this moment. But for the first time, he wasn't thinking about power or revenge. He was thinking about choice, about the kind of person he wanted to be. "Sarah," he said quietly, "get behind me." Then to Wheeler, "You want revenge? Here I am. But remember, you're not dealing with a scared student anymore." Thunder cracked outside as a storm rolled in, nature itself setting the stage for the confrontation to come. In his pocket, the USB drive contained enough truth to destroy everyone in the room. But right now, with Sarah to protect and multiple enemies closing in, Alex had to focus on more immediate truths, like the fact that he was done running from who he was. Lightning illuminated the workshop in stark flashes as Alex assessed his situation with the cold clarity his training had instilled. Wheeler's men were professionals. Their stances and the way they handled their concealed weapons told him they were former military, probably Taiwanese special forces. Behind him, he could feel Sarah's presence, her phone still broadcasting everything. Nikolai stood perfectly still, his experienced eyes tracking every movement in the room. "You know what's funny?" Wheeler said, taking a step forward. "Your father always acted so superior, like his empire made him untouchable. But in the end, all it took was a teenager's mistake. One moment of weakness when you showed what you really were at school, and everything started to unravel. You planned it," Alex realized. "Pushing Marcus to provoke me. The knife. You wanted me to break character." Wheeler's smile widened. "Kids are so predictable. Marcus played his part perfectly, even if he didn't know the whole plan. We just needed proof of who you really were, enough to convince Chief Bennett to move against your father." Thunder crashed outside as Alex processed this revelation. All those months of maintaining his cover, of enduring the bullying, it had been orchestrated from the start. But something else bothered him more. "Marcus," Alex called out, his voice carrying over the storm. "Did you know? When your father made you target me, did you know he was working with the people who really destroyed your family's business?" Confusion flickered across Marcus's face. Behind him, one of the Taiwanese men shifted nervously, watching the live stream on Sarah's phone continue to record. "Show him," Sarah said. "Show him what's on the drive." Alex pulled out the USB device. "Your father didn't just lose his business to mine, Marcus. He sold it out years ago. He's been laundering money for the Taiwanese using your family's legacy as a front. My father's takeover was retaliation for your father helping them move against his territory." "Shut up!" Wheeler shouted, but the damage was done. Marcus stared at his father, years of anger and resentment suddenly finding a new target. "Dad?" Marcus's voice cracked. "Is that true?" "Everything I did for us," Wheeler snarled. "After your mother died, the business was failing. They offered a way out, then Volkov came and took everything anyway. Now we take it back." The tension in the room shifted. Alex could see the Taiwanese men exchanging glances, clearly unhappy about Wheeler's exposure. Their carefully planned operation was unraveling on live stream. "Marcus," Alex said quietly, "I know what it's like to live in the shadow of your father's choices, to carry the weight of his world, but right now, you have a chance to make your own choice." Lightning flashed again, and in that bright moment, Alex saw the decision form in Marcus's eyes. The older boy stepped away from his father, the movement subtle but significant. Wheeler's control snapped. "Enough!" He pulled a gun, aiming it at Alex. "You're just like your father, always thinking you're so much smarter than everyone else. Let's see how smart you are with a bullet in your head." Several things happened at once. Marcus tackled his father, sending the gun skittering across the floor. The Taiwanese men drew their weapons, but Nikolai moved with surprising speed for his age, disarming the nearest one with a fluid motion that spoke of decades of experience. Sarah's live stream captured everything as Alex launched into action. All of his training, all of the skills he'd hidden for so long, emerged in a controlled burst of precision. He disarmed two of Wheeler's men using techniques Dmitri had drilled into him since childhood, but tempered the violence, choosing to incapacitate rather than seriously harm. Each move was calculated not to destroy, but to disable. Through the workshop windows, emergency lights began to flash. Police sirens grew louder, closer. The Taiwanese men, realizing their operation was compromised, started to retreat. Wheeler, bleeding from his struggle with Marcus, reached for the fallen gun. "Don't," Alex commanded, his voice carrying the full weight of his heritage. Wheeler froze, finally seeing what his son had realized, that the quiet student he'd tried to break was something far more dangerous than he'd imagined. As if on cue, the workshop doors burst open again. But instead of police, it was Dmitri who entered, leading a team of Viktor's most trusted men. They secured the room with professional efficiency, disarming the remaining threats. "Your father is safe," Dmitri reported. "The attack on the estate was repelled. He asks what you want done with them." He gestured to Wheeler and his allies. Alex looked at Sarah, still broadcasting, then at Marcus, who stood apart from his father with tears in his eyes. Finally, he turned to Nikolai, who watched him with quiet pride. "We do this my way," Alex said firmly. "No more shadows, no more violence." He held up the USB drive. "We use the truth." The aftermath of that stormy night reshaped more than just Alex's world. Sarah's livestream, combined with the evidence from her uncle's USB drive, exposed a web of corruption that reached from the streets of their small American town all the way back to Taiwan. The truth, as Nikolai had always taught, proved more powerful than any weapon. Wheeler and his Taiwanese partners were taken into custody, their careful plans undone by their own ambition. The evidence implicated them not just in the attack on the Volkov estate, but in years of money laundering and criminal enterprise. Chief Bennett, faced with proof of his involvement in Wheeler's schemes, resigned before charges could be filed. Marcus, freed from his father's toxic influence, came to Alex the day after everything happened. They met in the school courtyard, the same place where their conflict had begun months ago. "I don't expect you to forgive me," Marcus said, his voice rough with emotion. "I let my father's hatred become my own. I never questioned why." Alex studied the boy who had tormented him for so long, seeing now what Nikolai had tried to teach him about understanding one's enemies. "We both lived in our father's shadows," he replied. "The difference is, I chose to step into the light." Viktor Volkov, watching his empire crumble in the wake of the exposures, made one final surprising choice. Rather than flee or fight, he approached Alex in his private study, the room still bearing scars from the recent attack. "You found a different way," Viktor said, pouring himself a glass of vodka. "Not through fear or force, but through truth and choice." He smiled slightly. "Perhaps the son has become wiser than the father." Together they began the complex process of legitimizing what remained of the Volkov operations. It wasn't easy. Years of criminal enterprise couldn't be erased overnight. But with Nikolai's guidance and Alex's vision, they started transforming their organization into something new. Sarah's uncle, contacted in Hong Kong, expressed pride in how his niece had used his insurance policy. "Sometimes," he wrote in a letter, "the youngest generation must teach the oldest about honor." He gave Sarah and Alex his blessing to transform the workshop into their own enterprise, a legitimate business that would serve as a symbol of their shared belief in second chances. The workshop became their headquarters, not for criminal operations but for a foundation dedicated to helping young people escape the cycles of violence and corruption that had defined their own lives. Alex and Sarah worked side by side, turning the skills they'd inherited from their families toward building rather than destroying. Nikolai, watching their progress, reminded Alex of their first chess lesson. "The knight's greatest strength," he said, "was never in its ability to bypass obstacles, but in its potential to change the game entirely." 1 year after the night that had changed everything, Alex stood before a gathering of students at Riverside High. The school board had invited him to speak about transformation and choice. Looking out at the faces in the audience, he saw not potential enemies or allies, but young people standing at their own crossroads. "Power isn't just about what you can do to others," he told them, echoing the wisdom that had guided his journey. "It's about what you choose not to do, even when you could. It's about finding the strength to forge your own path, even when the easy road lies in darkness." Marcus sat in the front row, now working with Alex's foundation to help other kids resist the allure of easy money and quick power. Sarah watched from the side, her quiet strength still serving as Alex's moral compass. And somewhere in the back, Alex knew, Nikolai observed with the satisfaction of a teacher whose student had surpassed his lessons. The Volkov name still carried weight in certain circles, but now it stood for something different. Alex had proven that legacy isn't just what you inherit, it's what you choose to build with what you've been given. As he left the school that day, walking past the spots where he had once hidden from Marcus and his gang, Alex remembered the frightened boy who had tried so hard to be invisible. That boy was gone, replaced by someone who had learned that true strength lies not in the power to destroy, but in the courage to create something new. "Ready to head back to the workshop?" Sarah asked, falling into step beside him. "We've got that new youth program starting today." Alex smiled, feeling the weight of his father's watch on his wrist. No longer a symbol of hidden power, but a reminder of how far they'd all come. "Yes," he said, "it's time to show someone else how to step into the light,